Alright, in this video I want to cover the changes from version 2.0, which was the release of the art overhaul, so all the assets changed out, to version 2.1, which is currently live as of the publishing of this video. So this version 2.1 contains the big character component overhaul as well as some small optimizations, and I am currently working on version 2.2, which contains a ton of optimizations and improvements and a couple actually a new feature that I think you'll find very useful. So I'll go over this at the end. So this is just kind of being wrapped up right now. I have to work on some of the art assets to show off the new feature. Anyways, starting from the beginning, shortly after I took a quick break after the release, fixed a bug in the animation entity class, and this one was a pretty important one. So basically, if you added a firearm at any point in time other than at the initialization part, like begin play of your character, for example, or post init properties, then you would have a problem. I'm not going to go into deeply explaining like what the problem was, but that pretty much prevented you from being able to do anything like spawn the firearm and add it to your character after the fact of its initial creation, and caused an issue with switching firearms as well. So that one was pretty important. Next up, started working on moving everything to a character component. This has already been done. As I stated, it's already live. Went ahead and moved everything over and yada, yada, yada. Same thing. Still working on the character component. Fixed a ton of bugs because it actually created quite a few. I went through and I renamed and kind of reorganized all the classes. So now everything's in an appropriate spot. So miscellaneous contains like my statics class, this is going to be moved into a component later. My physical material, when I have all the firearm parts, same thing, but we have components organized into components, and our main actors set up as in their actors folder. So that all got nice and cleaned up. Officially moved everything out of the actual character class. So if we look at our character class, that used to be a giant, well, not really a giant, but had a good amount of stuff in it. The only extra stuff that it contains is logic for sprinting, and that's it. And that's just to kind of provide more of an example than anything, because as you can see here, I actually now have let's crap open, character class made entirely out of Blueprint that makes full use of the plugin, hence the character component. That was a big thing that I wanted to focus on and get out. So as I stated here, made a character entirely out of Blueprint, yada, 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 fixed ragdolls and then provided projectiles as well as spawning the effects for said projectiles. So, and as before this update, at least I think it was before this one, when your projectiles would hit something other than, one of these penetrable actors here that actually like give holes and all that kind of stuff, if they hit anything else, it wouldn't spawn the effects properly. So in the example of provided projectiles, I went ahead and fixed that up. So you have some nice logic there that you can reference in your own blueprints, or if you're working with C++, most likely you don't really need my reference there. Set up the ability to cap the tick rate for the firearm collision. So I set that up here in the character component. So if we go over to it, we have, let's see right here, use firearm collision. We have options for that, which have been recently added. Whether or not we want to cap the firearm or the collision tick rate. So this runs on every frame now. And here we have the ability to adjust and set the tick rate at which the firearm pulls for a collision. And I renamed the collision channel from I think it was just called port collision, to firearm collision channel. And I did that for the other assets as well, just to really kind of clean it up and give it a nice name that actually makes sense. So I already said it, I reorganized some of the classes. And here we're working on the last section where I actually hit submit. So started working on and marking some new properties that can be marked as transient. So that way we don't have to worry about them because we're not going to be saving them or anything. They're not going to be loaded from Blueprint. They're just going to be set via code, most of them through just getter functions. So no need to do anything else other than just mark them as transient. Fix the max up and down look angles with the new component system. So that allows us to, well, as you see here, look up angle and max look down angle. These were not working. These have been fixed now. So now you can limit it. So max lookup angle, if I set it to 30, I am in the wrong class. This is the one that I have active right now. So if I set that to 30, now it properly, when I look up, we are limited to 30 degrees. We cannot look up any farther. So that has been resolved and is now good to go. I know a lot of you don't really care anyways. Fixed a bug with the manually setting of the port pose not replicating. That's just the replication of going to high and low port. Firearm collisions still work just fine because that's running on their on your client. It's not actually being replicated or anything like that because it doesn't need to be. Made the high and low port pose for the third person character look a good bit better because before I didn't realize how far out from the body it was. It was like a solid, I'd say at least 8 inches away from the body when you would go into the high and low port, and it just looked kind of crappy. This one here, this was a big problem that I could not figure out why, and I ended up actually making a video on it just to kind of present it as a warning to people that are using get base aim rotation, because I know a lot of people do, because it is kind of like a replicated way of getting your control rotation in some sense. So previously, when we would look up and down at a lower frame rate, let me go down to like even 60, when I would look down and look back up, the left arm would be stuttering horribly, and that's because of us adjusting the spine for looking up and down. So even at 60 FPS, it was horrendous. But now, you know, even if I go down to 45 FPS, where this would almost be unplayable, it's still nice and smooth as butter. So that was a big fix there that was really just, it needed to be done. Remember what this was? Oh, yes. So with the new component system, I ended up having a problem with initialization and adding the firearm. So basically, what would happen was if we played with multiple clients, I'll show you the setting here in a minute. The firearm, great, that means I broke the left-hand IK. So I gotta fix that now, I guess. But basically, what was it like? The firearm would not be attached to the other character visually. So like when you're looking at other remote clients, you would not see the firearm attached, and that was due to the firearm being attached in begin play of the character, and it was just being kind of triggered too, it was just being triggered too early. So I set up a form of polling. So if we come over here, max firearm attachment attempts, as well as the firearm reattachment interval. So this is the amount of attempts that you want to be able to have to retry to attach the firearm, and this is the interval at which it attempts to retry it. So this tries for a max of 5 attempts, and each attempt is a half-second delay. So really, it's not enough to really visually tell, because what I've been testing with, this has worked on the first try, so the first refire attempt, and it's been good to go. So that was a big thing that needed to be added. Well, as you can see, the explanation right here, and all that fun stuff, and then submission. So that was a pretty good update with a good amount of fixes. And here has been a lot of optimization, including a new feature. A couple small changes like, well, this. So these are now tied into a single function that has made it a lot cleaner for handling the light. So here we have the function use light laser. You can pass in whether or not you want to use the light, the laser, or both, and it'll trigger them accordingly. So that was a nice little cleanup there. But basically, everything that can be cached has now been cached. So before this, what was happening was I just had an array of part components, and the only thing that I was storing was key parts, such as the barrel. I think I was doing the handguard, I was doing all of the sights, and I think that was actually it. So for example, if we wanted to find the muzzle to figure out if the muzzle was a suppressor or not. So like what we do here in the firearm, I'll use this as the example. Vent fire, call play fire sound, and here we check is suppressed. What is suppressed was having to do was it would get our barrel component. Sorry, one second, I got something in my throat. Crap, that was starting to burn. I don't know why. But what it was doing was it was getting the barrel component, and then it was from there looping through all of the attachments, so all the part components that were inside the barrel, until it found the muzzle device. And And then once it found the muzzle device, it would loop through all the part components that were attached to the muzzle device to find any potential attachments after that. So like if you had let's say you had a muzzle brake or a compensator, and then on the end of that you had a suppressor. So like that's how I have kind of my suppressor set up right here. So you can add the muzzle device like this, and then you can attach a suppressor on top of the muzzle device. So muzzle device, then suppressor. It was pretty much looping through to find the suppressor. Now that is all set up and cached, so all it has to do now is get the barrel. The barrel has a function on it to get the muzzle device or get whether or not suppressor. It's got a bunch of helper functions in it. And all that has to do is pull the cached muzzle device. Then inside the muzzle device, have the same exact function, which has it's basically a getter. So it gets the muzzle device, or sorry, not the muzzle device, the suppressor, like whether or not it's a suppressor, and returns that. So it's very straightforward. It's not having to loop through everything. Now it's just all cached and ready to go. It's much faster. It's just snap your fingers to go find it, what all it needs. Same thing for like the muzzle and all that kind of stuff, because it had to do the same thing. So that was a major thing that needed to be done. Another thing that happened was the reduction of bandwidth due to setting the conditions for the replication. So a lot of the stuff that, like all the U properties that have been replicated, where possible, I have set them to only replicate to the owner, so that way other clients are not receiving the replication of certain parts. So what I mean by that is, if I look at the firearm really quick, let me go to the light and laser. Here we have our light and laser components. So if you add a bunch of light and lasers, well, you get that. This is not replicated. Well, it is replicated, but it's only replicated to the owner of the firearm. That's because inside of the light and laser, there are replicated properties that control and trigger on-rep events that other players receive to handle, well, to get the replication, so they can see if the light or laser turns on or off based upon those replicated properties. So it's just saving some bandwidth there. Wherever I could, I was starting to pass things like vectors and all that, transforms, by reference instead of making a copy of them. Same thing with returning some of them. I have been learning and getting comfortable using ternary operators. I'm actually kind of starting to like them. Still scratch my head a little bit when I write them out, but I'm getting there. So these have started been introduced where they can be. Let's see. Added some helper functions. So just triggering ragdoll and ragdoll with force to the character component to make it a little bit easier, so that way it fires on both the third person and first person mesh. Added support for looking up and down and blending between multiple spine bones. So I'll show you that really quick. So if we look at, for example, the animation blueprint, we come over here to class defaults. Under toggles, we have use procedural spines, so that's whether or not you can look up and down. If you have your own aim offset, you would uncheck that, for example. Then we have the spine bone count. So if you want to apply it to just one spine bone, so like your upper spine bone, you would leave it at 1. If you want to split it between 2 or 3 spine bones, then you would set it to be 2 or 3 based upon what you're using. So you got to make sure you set that correctly. Okay, fixed potential crash, not really too much of a deal. Started to work on the new IK left hand, whatever you want to call it, animation system. So now we have a Tarkov-like system for your left hand. So that goes for your forward grips. So for example, here you can see I don't have a forward grip. I'm just gripping the handguard like normal. I'll add the goofy guy that I added. So this is basically, as you can see, it's just I don't know what the heck you would even call this. It's like a 45-degree offset grip. We now have a grip for it just fine. We now have one for an angled grip. We now have one for a normal vertical grip, and they all have different hand poses, as you can see, like so, which is obviously what you want there. So this is dependent purely, crap, I really screwed up that pinky though. Like I said, this was referring to when I was mentioning I need to do some of the artwork, but this is referring to the actual parts themselves. So you can have an infinite number, or each part can have its own form of grip. So what I mean by that, let me head over, I'll start with the handguards. So if I look at the handguard here, on this side we have a grip animation. So by default, I leave it at none. I just named the animations test. I'll do the vertical. So if I set this to have what I would grip for whatever, the vertical, as you can see, it is now using that form of grip. Obviously that doesn't fit here, but that allows you to have different things. So for example, this M-lock rail right here that's nice and skinny, this would have a different grip than a thick quad rail. So you could have unique grips for each of those and just switch between them pretty much effortlessly, because all you had to do is just set the grip animation. That's it. Now it's the exact same thing for other parts. So if we head over to our forward grip, like this vertical grip here, we have the grip animation set for the vertical grip, which is simply, well, a vertical grip, and that's it. And it just attaches right to it. And you can see we can move it up and back, and the grip just follows. After reloads, it goes right back, and all that kind of stuff. Reload animation needs some work. I need to work on the blending in and out so it doesn't do the clipping through the handguard as bad, but it's all work in progress. This one was more so from a request, but I added 2 functions that you can now call from Blueprint. And this is for specifically when you're aiming with a magnified optic. So let me go ahead and throw this one on. Here I'm moving my mouse at the same speed, and as I zoom in, you can see my mouse sensitivity decreases like that. And I just kind of added some helper functions to help with that. So for example, this Blueprint character here, for look up and turn, so, you know, looking up and down and looking left and right, we have 2 functions. One is get magnification sensitivity. So this is my default way of how I handle it. And it basically, as you zoom in, it scales with your magnification. So 1 power is default. And as you increase magnification, let's say you go to 8 power, your mouse sensitivity gets lowered like I just showed you. And then we have another one, get magnification sensitivity start value. So this basically allows you to do the exact same thing. However, it doesn't trigger until you're past a certain magnification. So I have it set to 4 by default. So this won't start lowering your mouse sensitivity until you're at past 4 power on your optic. So that's what that is there for. So those were, again, just kind of requests, and I thought they were a pretty good idea to implement just so people have them. Okay, so that was here. So I got that AK animation system that I just mentioned, working with handguards and all that fun stuff. And I started working on making changes to work with complete firearms as well. So this was just kind of, I needed to, so far I've only had to fix one thing, and that was the, what do you call it? The left hand, like the grip positioning and all that, like what animation to use. But that was just so if we have a firearm that's not split out into a bunch of parts like this one is, as you can see here, the receiver is one portion, stock's another part, the charging handle is a different part, pistol guard's a different part, or the handguard's a different part, the barrel's a different part. Everything is its own part. If it was all combined, I wanted to make sure that that would work as well. And I went ahead and did some testing, got it set up, so it seems like it's good to go. So you just got to make sure you incorporate the muzzle socket, aim socket, and left hand IK if you want to make use of it. So like, for example, with the forward grips and stuff like that. So that pretty much wraps up the changes. I'm going to be going through and cleaning up whatever I can and just doing some minor fixes, whatever comes up for the next release. But I'm assuming, well, I'm hoping I can release version 2.2 sometime tomorrow, at least get it submitted for approval. So that way, one, you guys can play around with the new left hand animation system, as well as, well, enjoy some of the bug fixes and performance improvements. So I'm going to end up having a video, so I'll be actually recording it shortly after, covering how to use the character component. But if you want a quick rundown, all you do, just add a FPS template character component, and you have all your functions right in there. So if I go ahead and just look through it real quick, we can drag out, go to FPS template, we have all of our sections. So for our character, we have a ton of helper functions and checkers and all that kind of stuff. We have our init function for setting it up, which I'll go over in the video. All the functions regarding to firearms. relating to our high and low port positioning, and everything related to procedural animation. So that's going to be all for this video. If you like what I'm doing and you want to help support me, you can find a link to my Patreon in the description below. And if you have any questions or anything about this plugin or just programming in general, game development, whatever, feel free to join my Discord. That's also linked down below, and I'll try to help you out, as well as so will many of my Discord members. And if you're interested in this plugin, you can check the link in the description below, and it'll take you to the web page. So now I'll see you in the next video.